Welcome to GoFor's webinar, Ethical Design from High-Level Commitment to Action. This webinar is a part of our three-part webinar series on ethical digitalization. Design thinking and service design methodology is something that most of us are familiar with. Importance of usability, customer understanding, and people-centric development is widely understood and recognized. But today we present something new to the discussion of design thinking. Ethical design is an approach that GoFor service designers have created. Today we will learn more about it, how this value-based approach invites us to be reflective and more aware of our own concepts of what is good. How exciting is that? We will hear three brilliant speakers, our designers Sami Vihavainen, Sahal, Estimé, and Suvi Leander will challenge us to join this discussion on what good means in our ethical digitalization and also what kind of society we want to design. And I want to remind you that if you have any questions, and you probably do, don't hesitate to ask them in the webinar chat. You can do that already during the presentation, and we have plenty of time in the end for questions and discussion. First, we will hear Sami Vihavainen, and he will tell us about the background on ethical design and how the work began. Sami is the principal designer at GoFor, and he leads projects consisting of user research, concepting, and validating digital services. And Sami also holds a doctorate in human-computer interaction. Next, we will hear Sahal, Estimé telling us the ethical lenses that were created in ethical design work. Michel is a service designer at GoFor with a particular interest in leveraging design to develop a more equitable society. Michel has a multidisciplinary background, having worked with public health, communications, policy advocacy, and research in the past. As the third part of the content, Suvi Leander presents the design tools that can be used in ethical design work. Suvi works as a senior service designer and user researcher at GoFor. And Suvi has over 15 years of experience in service design in both public and private sectors, from industry to product businesses. We are also interested to hear what the ethical discussion topics in your own work and organization are. And you have a possibility to answer a poll while Michel is talking, but we will get to that later. Now, let's give a warm welcome to our speakers, Sami, Michel, and Suvi. The stage is yours.
Thanks, Eva, for the introduction, and welcome. So, for the next 40 minutes, let's dive into ethical design. More precisely, theory and practice about how can we aim toward socially sustainable digitalization. Since we talk about ethics, you might think that we'll start from ancient Greeks, perhaps, but let's not do that today. Let's start from our website. So, on our website, on GoFor's website, we present that we built ethical digital world. We think that's a great promise, and we're proud of it. And also many others seem to agree. For example, our customers have been really interested, and candidates in our job interviews often mention ethical digital as a reason to apply for GoFor. But we also often hear the question that, what is ethical design? What do you guys mean by it? And let's go ahead and see if we'll get an answer to that. So first of all, attitude matters. So here's a snapshot from LinkedIn post by one of our colleagues. So on top here, Janne describes a bad digitalization experience a senior citizen had related to post office service. The senior citizen got a text message that requested him open a link and log into post office's internet service and select a package delivery time. However, she did not have a smartphone or internet. Therefore, she was unable to select the delivery time. In the full LinkedIn post, Janne raises also a point: who authorized to design public services that discriminate senior citizens? That's a good question. Maybe no one specifically. But I think it's great that at Go4 we have courage to bring out also the challenges digitalization sometimes brings to society. However, there are also other state of minds. Below Janne's post there was a comment that argued that we can't support everyone and called for those senior citizens' own responsibility to keep up with the pace of digitalization. Anyway, we see that since digitalization penetrates the whole society so strongly, we should take the responsibility to design in a socially sustainable way and kind of keep people on board. Certainly, one could argue that Janne's example was an exception. However, it actually scales. So here are a couple of related articles from Finland, and one raising the point that there are about 1 million people in Finland who can't use computers or are bad at using them. And the other describing how there is about 500,000 Finns who don't have bank IDs. And still in Finland, bank ID is currently the de facto way to log into everyday digital services. So the point here is, let's not design societies where people feel like second-class citizens.
Really great examples, Sami. Do you think that us, as consultants working on digitalization, do we have a part to play in this? Is there something we can do to kind of stop this from happening in the future?
Well, that's a great question. So I think there's a lot we can do. But on the other hand, as consultants, we can't do it all. So what we can do first is we can talk about this issue and raise awareness, show that we care, and build collaboration with others. And I guess that's actually one reason we arranged this webinar anyway. So raising awareness, supporting discussion, and creating collaboration possibilities. Also, one really concrete thing that we at Go4 recently did, that we wrote a booklet about ethical design. It's actually here. And in that booklet, we give ideas and tools for sustainable digitalization. And also another thing that really concrete thing was that we, as part of Go4's new strategy, we have a plan to start an Go4 Impact Foundation. It's still a plan, but we are really excited.
Great. Thanks, Sami.
So, as part of our ethical design work, we've been discussing what should ethical digitalization be like. What should it look like? What kind of things should we take into account as part of design activities. We came up with the following. So ethical digitalization should be inclusive, take into account people's well-being, see technology as a collaborator rather than a replacement for people, recognize the need for social innovations as much as technological ones, and overall aim to help create good life in just societies in harmony with nature. So I mentioned the booklet we wrote. It was kind of a step forward in our ethical Goforce ethical path. And in that booklet, we aim to invite to discussion and provide both thinking and tools to help design more ethically. For example, we want to remind that people are in active role every day in steering technologies into directions they consider valuable for society. Also, it's not just about technological innovations. We also need social innovations. But we need to take a moment to think, what do we see as valuable in society, and connect that to digital products and services we create. And as tools in the booklet, we present several lenses and canvases to guide design systematically to socially sustainable direction. Although we today talk about digitalization, sometimes it's actually good to remind that there's actually a long history of unethical design. So here's one example, an often used example from pre-digital era about values in design. It's a project in New York City where the city planner at the time constructed highway overpasses so low that they prevented tall vehicles, such as buses, from using the highway without hitting the bridge. So what this design did, that it stopped people who rode the bus from accessing certain high-quality beaches. And in practice, this meant people with lower socioeconomic status, poor people and minorities, basically. So the reasons might have been racist values or narrow-sighted design process, but nevertheless, it's clear that the impact of design on society was significant. And I've been actually really glad to see that at least at Gofor, we have committed to work in a way that we won't recreate that kind of past. And also making the effort that the benefits of digitalization would distribute evenly. And we wouldn't kind of create those digital beaches or overpasses that only privileged and tech-savvy people are able to use. So, this is my last slide before Michel's part, but so last slide from theory. So I mentioned values in that bridge example. So whose values actually get into implemented in design? And the point in this this colorful picture with full of arrows and bubbles is that design is in many ways a social process. There are tech experts, management, designers, etc., who negotiate what will the design be like, what should it look like. And in those negotiations, those who are involved have a chance to get their values implemented and form the common understanding about what the design should be like. On the other hand, those who are left out from the inner circle might not get their voices heard. So basically, this picture shows that there are often biases related to power relations in those negotiations. And we also need to be careful to provide comfortable spaces and possibilities for different values to be heard.
Yes, there surely are quite many colorful bubbles in the picture. So could you please clarify something quickly? So who are these primary and secondary users?
Hey, yeah, that's a good point, Suvi. Thanks. So, as primary users, we mean here by people who are in direct contact with the service often. They are the users also who often are prioritized in the design. By the secondary, on the other hand, we mean users who occasionally use the service. And by indirect users, we simply mean people who get affected by the service but are not in direct interaction with it. But hey, next Michelle will talk about concrete steps towards ethical design. There you go.
Thanks, Sami. All right, so let's get to the exciting part. As Sami mentioned earlier in the presentation, the basis of ethics is to promote good life in just societies, but also to work towards that. But for us, the key question at Go4, and I guess everyone who's working on digitalization in general, the key question is, how can we do this when creating these digital services? Let's go into that. Of course, our answer to the previous question is now ethical design, because we're talking about ethical design today. So that takes us, we see it as it taking us one step closer to ethical digitalization. So the way we see it is that the ethical perspective should be present in all stages of our work as a cross-cutting approach throughout. And here you see on this slide a lot of text, but don't worry, I'll walk you through it. As an example on this slide, we've recognized many elements in the traditional design process that would benefit from a more ethical approach. So traditionally, technology and business goals are the primary drivers for a project, and the use language often reflects this. In the initial stages of the project, when we're actually developing this shared understanding and language, it's really important to do this from an ethical and inclusive perspective. Because if we fail at this point, then throughout we'll be missing it. So make sure to define the human values in addition to the business and tech values. And so following, when mapping stakeholders and involving actual users, it's really important to consider who does this design influence and take a wider perspective than we perhaps do now. Not only thinking about what Sami just mentioned, the primary users and primary stakeholders, but take a wider perspective to take into consideration a wider audience and also societal views. Ask yourselves, who are we leaving behind right now if we don't pay attention? And so during the design process, move one step further from the basic human-centered design process and let the basis of ethics guide you through your work. So just kind of aim higher at promoting good life for users and for those affected by the design, everyone affected by the design. Think about what and whose values are driving the project. And next, when you're evaluating the impact of the project, again, look wider beyond the usual scope and think about the societal impact of the design. Think about, we recognize that there might be some negative societal impacts, but think about how could you reduce those negative societal impacts and then also increase the positive ones. And last but not least, it's really, really important to have both a diverse and multidisciplinary team working on the design. We really need people with different backgrounds, but also people who understand the social side of IT in addition to the tech side of it. Good. And let's move forward to the part I'm sure everyone's eagerly waiting for the concrete tools. First, I'll be presenting these ethical design lenses, which you already heard mentioned before. And later on, Suvi will present the actual tools and canvases that we've developed in this work. And they're all included in the booklet as well. So we created these 9 lenses through which we can look at our projects, organizations, and really the whole world around us. All of these lenses, they can help us make choices that promote good life and address the negative impacts of digitalization. As you can see in the picture, all of these lenses are grounded in human involvement. It's on the bottom there under the flowers. And I'm going to, because the text is a little bit small, I'm going to read the lenses for you as well. So it's equality, inclusion, having human in control, well-being, privacy, trustworthiness, accountability, transparency, and also environmental responsibility. So the way we suggest you to look at these lenses is we suggest that they function as a starting point or a step toward ethical design and digitalization. And each of these lenses you can use to inspire thinking about ethics from different perspectives. We realize, of course, that the lenses, they don't function in a vacuum, and there are sometimes tensions between the lenses. For example, we've noticed that transparency and privacy can have some tensions in different projects. But the important thing here is to acknowledge and recognize what the implications of each of these are, and then make those informed decisions so that you don't have any, I guess, negative surprises after the project. So now, actually, Eva mentioned that we have a poll. I believe that the poll is now open, and I hope you'll answer it accordingly. Think about which of these ethical lenses are right now current or important in your own work. I think it should be around maybe under the chat on the right side, and you can choose up to 3 lenses. It'll be really interesting to see at the end what you chose. And you can answer the poll throughout this talk, I guess. And the end we'll look. Good. So one of the questions we get a lot is, how did you create these lenses? How did you come up with them? They really did not just come out of nowhere, and we actually had quite a long process thinking about them. So we started off by reviewing social issues and trends in society and their relation to digitalization. And we might by no means say that we're the first ones to have ever created these ethical design frameworks. There's plenty, they do exist. So we went through and we did some desk research. We studied the existing ethical design frameworks, and then we synthesized and analyzed all of the data we had collected. And we came up with a list that felt relevant for us as Goforians. And once we had the initial list, we had some workshops and several rounds of iteration. We also collaborated with a student group to test the lenses with the users. So we did a lot of exercise around this, both internally and externally. And now we feel quite confident in the list that we created. Good, so I'm going to do a small deep dive into what the lenses look like in the booklet. Like I said, there's 9 lenses, and for each of them, there's a brief explanation of the lens on one page, on the first page, and that's what you see on the left here. And to give some more flesh around the bones, we also decided to give some concrete tips on where to pay attention and how to review your work through each of these lenses. And that's what you see on the right side.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Can you give us an example how one could use these lenses in a design project?
Yeah, definitely. We actually just a while ago used these in a user testing for a large digital public service, a website. which has a huge amount of information. So we did the regular user testing, and then afterwards, the users were asked to select which ones they think, which one of these ethical design lenses they find most relevant to the service. And then afterwards, they also thought about, they were also asked to select which ones actually are realized in the service. And that was, I think, the interesting part, to see the difference of they think that these are important, but they're not necessarily the same ones that are actually reflected in the service. So that kind of gives us guidelines on how to move forward. What do we need to focus on to make this a little bit more ethical?
Yeah. I'm sure that this is also very interesting to the customers,
Yeah,
to see what people think.
exactly. Definitely so. Good. So, Suvi, glad you're here. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Please tell us about the tools that we created in this work.
Yes. Okay. So thank you, Michelle. So in addition to these design lenses, we also have some other tools for various project purposes. Here on the next 2 slides, we will present small thumbnails of the content that you'll find from the booklet. And you get a better guidance also from there. But we still wanted to gather all of the tools together to this presentation, so you get a sneak peek of what's inside. I will shortly present few of the tools in more detail, but first a few points from this slide. There we have a table called Organizations Ethics Maturity Level Table. It's a tool that guides you from where to start and which tools to use. We understand that our customers are on different levels on both regarding their interest and also their capability to act on these. But that doesn't mean that you can't do anything. You can always start small and later increase the ethical dialogue in your project. From the booklet, you can find simple and easy to use questions as discussion starters and more advanced tools for workshopping. Some of these tools are based on known user research and service design methods, but here we present them with an ethical twist. In this slide, I would also like to mention a few of them. First, on the left side, we have the personas for vulnerable groups. The aim here is to highlight the risks, opportunities, goals, and feelings of those who belong to minority groups. When you have recognized them, it is important to also understand their needs and pain points. This can be done, for example, by recruiting participants to user studies more inclusively and also pay attention to these user groups while doing design decisions. On the lower left corner, there is the ethics timeline, which is a very nice and concrete retrospective tool for your project. With this tool, the project group thinks back about the project and reflects the process and outcomes with ethical team questions. All of these tools can be found from the booklet, but we are also making printable and downloadable PDFs, so it's easier for you to use them, for example, in workshops. We will add those later on a Goforce website, so you can find them there. Or you can always contact one of us and ask for them. You can also add these worksheets, for example, to Miro board or some other whiteboard tool, so that you can use all of the tools both in live and remote workshop sessions. Okay, so I promised to explain a few tools in more detail, and one of these examples I want to highlight is the stakeholder map. That might be quite familiar to some of you. In our version, we have turned the circles upside down, where we have put those users who might be in the fear of being left out in the middle. Others impacted next, and the primary users only after that. And that's why we call it the reversed stakeholder map. All important stakeholders are included, but the way we weigh in their importance or the impact in their lives is a bit different. It's quite common to focus primarily on the primary user groups, maybe a bit on the secondary user groups, but the outer circles are left with minimal amount of attention. So here we want to bring those groups to the core and bear in mind also the impact the designed service might have on their lives and give them attention equally. Important thing, of course, also is that we have to take into account the surrounding society. Okay, the next example with a lot of small text, but don't worry, I walk you through this one. This is one of the advanced ones, a canvas tool meant for workshopping, and it is called the Ethical Design Canvas. This canvas actually has several tools combined, and in the instructions it says that first you could fill in the stakeholder map, and after that select the relevant ethical design lenses for your project. This part is important because among the project group and other design stakeholders, it's very important to find a common understanding. It might be that the same ethical lenses are understood differently. So it's good to go through that dialogue together and decide how these values are represented in the project. And next, on the upper right corner, there is the beef of this canvas, and I might say also the maybe the difficult part. So here the aim is to think about the possible impact on vulnerable groups. What kind of opportunities or risks there are regarding the individuals or the surroundings. It's impossible to make solutions that are perfect for everyone, but it is important to make informed decisions also about the negative impacts that the design might have on people's lives. Then, based on this thinking, you can make a value proposition for the vulnerable groups. What can we promise? What kind of value will they get out of this design? Or how have we acknowledged the difficulties that may occur? And as usual, at the end of the workshop, make solution and action proposals on what are the next steps. For example, what kind of user research activities are needed. Remember that also this canvas can be modified to your purposes. Also, we found out when we have been trying this out that we needed some modifications in the middle part. And more about that. Next, we will talk about our experiences with these tools. As mentioned before, this is quite new. This booklet came out last fall, so we have been doing some tryouts with each of the tools. We have noticed that this ethical design resonates to our customers, and they become curious what this is all about. But they often don't know to ask about the ethical viewpoint. But as we have now decided that this is our way of doing things, so we have just started using the tools, trying them out, and then when we are discussing with the customers and presenting the project results, the customers have usually been pleased about this extra dimension. Often the discussion in the beginning of a project is still focused on business and technology, but we want to bring in the ethical and socially sustainable viewpoint into the table. So now let's tell a few stories about these tools. Can you, Sami, first tell about your experiences with the ethical design canvas?
Yeah, sure. Well, as a part of one of our recent projects, we used the ethical design canvas to analyze one concept as part of a large-scale industry process. and we analyzed its social implications. So what we did was that we took our interview data that we have gathered from the project, and afterwards used that and the canvas to systematically to brainstorm and discuss about the possible social implications of the process, and in the end also formed design guidelines from socially sustainable view. That's one example. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Suvi? Do you have any experiences?
Yes. In my recent project, I have tried out the ethical design lenses, so that we did a large user research where we gathered a lot of data from challenging life situations of people and families. And then we, of course, did the analysis with quite traditional method. But when the analysis was almost ready, then we took the ethical design lenses and saw which of the lenses arise from the data. And actually that worked quite well. So during the presentation about the results, we presented which of the kind of lenses or values could be used as design drivers for the concepting phase. And for this kind of way of using the lenses, you can do it also more systematically if you want. In our case, it was quite clear which ones to select, but in other cases it might not be so clear, so you can take one lens to the table one of a time and then see if this value is present in the data or not.
Good. Thanks.
And next we have a third example. Michelle, can you tell about the reversed stakeholder map?
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite tools here because it's so easy to use. It's a tool that just easily goes into the way we work already. Because like you said, Suvi, we usually always use the stakeholder mapping in the beginning of the project. And so it was easy to just switch into using the reverse stakeholder map instead of that. I've used it in a few projects related to education and kind of just recognizing then there who are the people we want to have involved in the user research or the co-creation phases. And so it was really, really good to put those most vulnerable in the center and then bring it up for discussion, because really those are the people who in general might have been forgotten from it. So it was good to have them already in the beginning, kind of front and central, and then have the discussion of if we want to include these groups or these people, what are the kind of steps or measures we have to take for it to actually happen and for it to be meaningful for these people as well.
Yeah.
And of course, once we did that, the results of the project ended up being more robust and kind of more overarching.
Yeah, it seems that from these examples that if we designers use these tools, they are a great discussion starter in the project when we can kind of have these kind of things to back up the results. Okay, so we are almost at the end of our presentation, so let's go through the conclusion. As a reminder, ethical design is a value-based approach that requires the presence of ethical thinking throughout the design process. It means informed decisions, making those among diverse teams, dialogue, and long-term impact evaluation. The outcomes that are designed ethically are sustainable, usable, inclusive, support well-being, and do not replace humans. So, the journey has already begun and we are going through a paradigm shift. We like to say it so. These are some concrete actions how you can get started. And remember that you can always start small, like we have done in our customer work, but this kind of ethical thinking will grow bigger, and it also gets more important in the surrounding world. These materials are meant for everyone, not only for designers, but everyone, to be used in your work. And on this slide, you'll find instructions where to download the booklet, and maybe also in the chat there might be a link how to get this, but you can find it from the Go4 website. We also have these physical copies in our offices, so you can ask for one from a friendly Go4ian. We are very happy to get feedback and join discussions with you. It would be great to hear what you are thinking also from the chat, because soon we will start a discussion together. So thank you from all of us. This was the presentation part. And next, don't go anywhere. We will very shortly come back with the group discussions where we will go through all of your questions. So thank you.
Thank you for your inspiring words, Sami, Michel, and Suvi. And now we will have a look at the poll and all of your answers. What were the ethical talking points and topics that you are now dealing with in your work and organizations? So let's have a look at the results. And trustworthiness is the absolute winner in this poll, or got the most votes. What do you think of the result, guys?
Yeah, trustworthiness, equality, they seem to be somewhat ahead of others. Well, trustworthiness is a great choice from the audience.
Yeah, I would also say so. I think that privacy is something that has been in the headlines for the, let's say, past year and so quite a lot. So it's obvious that it's here in a high ranking. And maybe the human in control bubbling under there, it's something that there's a lot of discussion around AI especially, and the human role in the usage of AI. But trustworthiness is probably something that sort of deals with all of us, individuals and also organizations. So it's something that it's easy to grasp, don't you think?
And I think it's kind of overlaps with some of the others, like trustworthiness. Like I think it's something like you trust that someone is capable and willing to to do something for you.
Yeah.
So something good for you. So I think that's kind of tells a lot.
Yeah. Well-designed lenses, since there's a lot of sort of recognizable in those. Okay, next we will get to the questions, but the booklet has been mentioned many times, but as Suvi said, the link is also shared in the webinar chat, and this booklet can be downloaded from our website. And I have to say that I personally love it. The concrete tools that it presents is something that I recommend you to familiarize yourselves with. But now let's get to the discussion and the questions. And here are already some questions in the chat, and remember to send more of those. And maybe we can start with Emmy's question. Can you use these tools only in the beginning of a project, or could they be utilized also in the later phases of a project?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Emmi?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good question, and we actually have on one of the pages in the booklet we have I only showed like two columns of this table, but we've actually mapped which tools you can use at which stage as well. So definitely you can use all of these tools. Of course, certain tools kind of place in a certain part of the project, but we have tools for throughout. And for example, the canvas is something that you can use throughout the whole project as well. Definitely. It's really, really important to have the ethical mindset and these tools to support your work as well throughout.
And like in general, if you are starting a project, you might have some kind of hypothesis that how do things go forward. But as things go forward, as the project goes on, things develop, you learn new things, and eventually you will get that new digital service or a product into the world, and then you also need to understand that how does it get adopted,
Yeah.
and what kind of groups find that it's for them, what kind of groups might be that, hey, this is not for me, and then you have place to learn again that
Yeah.
if we do the right thing, how can we perhaps iterate.
Yeah.
I could maybe add that in addition to the tools, in the background or in the forefront, there is always the users that you are involving. So that is also the ethical design mindset, is to recruit many kinds of users and do this kind of inclusive recruiting also. So that happens usually in many phases of the project, in the beginning, in the middle, and then when validating the results.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point as well. So ethical design and ethical work is continuous improvement as we sort of do our business anyway, or in most of the project, as we are used to. And then Daniel has a really good question. How receptive would you say clients are in general to this approach? Have you also had some pushback?
Well, actually, we have started to add to our offers that we are creating when a customer is asking for a project. We do the plan for the project. So as we said before, we have just started using this to trying it out. So it's not like an extra thing to sell on top of the project, but it's something that is included. And so far, it has been positive feedback. And of course, this kind of new dimension is interesting to many customers. So no pushbacks yet, but I think that with the tools we can always iterate and make them better and come up with new tools.
Yeah, and maybe as a sort of extra question here, how well do customers recognize the ethical dilemmas or the potential pitfalls that might be there? How much do you sort of do cooperation, or how does this discussion begin?
Maybe they don't always recognize or notice or realize. So for us, it's also been kind of a conversation starter or something that we've done in projects, and without them asking, without the client maybe asking, we've offered this. And that has been very, very kind of opened with warm, it's gotten a warm welcome as well, and people have liked it and been very impressed with the results that we've produced.
And certainly it also depends on the kind of the maturity level of the client organization, and what kind of culture do they have there, and certainly business and technology are big drivers, but I think increasingly organizations also recognize kind of the social impact as a driver to design.
And we just had a talk with one of our designers in a project that often the customers, when they are building these large systems, they are aiming for good. They are aiming for efficiency and improving the service. But for example, when we are handling people's personal data, there might be an underlying ethical dilemma that it's you need to think with this way to spot it, it can create some kind of uneven power relations and so on. So that's why it's good kind of being aware.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, while I was listening to you guys, it sort of came clear to me that we cannot just state that we will do our work ethically and not use some concrete tools to then actually execute that, since otherwise it's just empty promises or it's just these nice speeches that we give in conferences. So it's really like easy to agree with you when you are presenting the concrete tools and how actually then the potential problems or the difficulties are then raised to the discussion. So it's true that customers don't mean they try to do it
Yes.
as well as they can, but we can offer these extra tools.
Sometimes it doesn't have to be complex.
Yeah.
You just need to have time and kind of take a moment and
Yeah.
discuss
Yeah.
systematically.
There's also one question from Anton, and this is an example that we are all familiar with. I wonder if people are thinking ethical as they design for the metaverse. What concerns you about the metaverse from an ethical point of view? A big question.
And that's a great question.
Yeah.
I would say that since many technologies we create, they're actually kind of they are related to our social world, social interaction between people, and trying to make that more smooth or try to help people to fulfill their social goals. I think probably the same kind of overall social interaction also will happen in metaverse. It's just digital there. Certainly, a lot of new things which probably we can't yet imagine will happen, but still, I would say that it will be social interaction between people. And by that, my guess is that this kind of approach also might find space in metaverse as well.
And there have also been discussion. I think there might be quite many ethical dilemmas there, and also, for example, regarding the addictiveness of it. It might become quite addicting, and for example, for children and young people, it's already a big thing that they are using digital services and social media so much. So that's one of my personal fears, that my children would get lost in the metaverse and spend a lot of time there.
Now they have their iPads or phones, but then when they have the goggles,
Yes.
what do you do?
Well, I also have one question. Ethical design, it means that we do things differently. You have a lot of new sort of the lenses and the tools, and the process will be different. So how do you sell this idea to the customer, or how do you present this new way of working in the project, where there might be also other companies and a large network of people doing the work?
I think that's a really important point, and I think it's important to recognize that many companies, many organizations actually have these type of things on a strategic level already. They've already decided that they want to advance equality or they want to be inclusive. So in that sense, it's kind of easy to then just provide the tools for it. So it's kind of helping them realize their strategic vision. So in that sense, we've noticed that there's been a need, or people are excited when they see it. There was, for example, one offer that we actually won because of this ethical approach. So there seems to be a kind of a need.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And in fact, we discussed the same theme with Kristina and Anna in the previous webinar of ethical digitalization and how, for example, values are always stated in the company strategies. But they might seem a bit vague. They are quite similar when we compare companies to each other. Everybody wants to be good for the people and for the environment and carry their responsibilities. But then actually, how do these companies do that? And what are the practical implications? That's much more difficult to put in a sentence. And if these tools provide an answer to that, what could be better?
One thing that is presented in the booklet is that you could also create ethical KPIs to your project. So that's one concrete tools, because we know that often the KPIs are related to business goals and so on.
Yeah, in fact, there's one question online of how we can measure it. So you already probably answered to that question.
Yes, you can download the booklet and do the bullets there. But yes, it depends. Usually, I think the measuring is a difficult question always when we talk about user experience and design, because you should then have some kind of base level in the beginning to compare in the end. So, but I think that in projects we can come up with good metrics also for this one. For example, related to the user research and what kind of users we are involving in the user. That's one concrete way of doing this.
Yeah. And also sort of the high level talk of responsibility is something that might leave more questions than answers to the table. So having the KPIs in the discussion is also something that it's a very concrete way of taking it forward. Janne has a question concerning the idea that technology should not replace people. Is there a chance, considering how diverse people are, that some actually would welcome the replacement to a degree, at least in some contexts?
That's a good point. Yeah, and when you're talking about, for example, automation, automation often point is to kind of transfer the tasks from human to computer. That's the basic. And if there are tasks that people are annoyed doing, don't want to do, they are too laborious, of course, yes. Let's make machines to do those kind of work. But oftentimes it seems that people still kind of need to be in the loop, kind of be at least as a supervisor in the process, for example.
Yeah.
And I think this also goes into, we have human involvement as the basis of all of these lenses. So I think this also goes into, we need to ask people who is annoyed with what functions, who wants and needs what type of automation. So I think that's one of the main points also. We can't forget to actually ask these diverse set of people.
Yeah. And I think that the discussion quite often leads to this dystopic view of the world that chatbots or bots will do the decisions and people will be left out. And when we are talking about ethical digitalization, the human involvement is something that we should never forget. Yeah. And the sort of the public discussion gets maybe even a bit distracted quite easily in this human involvement topic. Okay, Aino has a question. How do you ensure that minorities are taken into account in the project so that their voices are heard? Often we think we are standing up for different minorities, but in reality we are not listening, we are assuming.
That's a really, really important point. And again, goes back to recruiting a group of people that are diverse enough, and then actually hearing their needs, putting money, putting time, because it does take more resources to have a wider group of people involved in the user research. So that's, I guess, the key. Otherwise, if we don't do that, then we miss out, and definitely should not assume, but ask.
And our stakeholder map, the reversed one, that's one tool to use, kind of put the minorities in the spotlight, kind of. And of course, always remember that you are not the user. When you are designing something, you are not the user.
And I think that's a really important question, and that's the one that we are also struggling with. So in projects we have limited resources, and then we kind of have to explain why this is important, why it takes more money and time. So this is one of the kind of key things to keep in mind when doing ethical design projects.
Yeah.
And actually, that's why we've designed a few of the tools to kind of keep that thought throughout. We have the reverse stakeholder map, then we have the vulnerable group personas. So all of these, the reverse stakeholder map initially helps you think about, so what do we need to do to make sure that these people are involved? Usually it means put more time, put more effort, put more resources. And then we have maybe the personas kind of on a wall somewhere even. If you were sitting in an office, put them on a wall, remind yourself constantly, these are the people we need to involve throughout.
Yes, and how you create the personas, it's of course that you really find them and talk with them,
Yeah.
and not assuming.
Yeah. And also these kind of maybe flaws during the project then can lead to the final service or the final product working or not functioning in an intended way. Just yesterday when we were preparing for the webinar, I heard from a colleague that he had witnessed a user testing situation where this user with a not that good eyesight could place all the or could make the order in a web shop until it was the time to pay. And for that button, the usability didn't work for this disabled user, and it's quite a big functionality to sort of take care of in the end. So things that seem minor might then end up in really.
Yeah, it can be a €1 million button.
Yeah, yeah, it can. Kirsi has a question. Do you believe that service design ethically will success in comparison to services that do not apply ethics? Is the value added enough?
Is the value added enough?
So sort of that if we do ethical design or decide not to do that, then sort of what is the outcome, or if we compare these?
I think that there are now, for example, in the examples in our presentation, with people who don't have digital identification can't do pretty much anything. So this kind of full service design paths, different ways of doing things with digital services, but also with other ways. So I think that's the added value, that people can kind of live their lives and do things in their everyday lives. And we hear then these examples in the media when something is going wrong. So hopefully this kind of thinking will kind of, we will become more awareness of this kind of issues that might come.
I do definitely, personally, of course that's my opinion, but I do feel like definitely there's a value add. Definitely we don't want to create a society where 1 million people or however many people are left outside. I would hope that's not the society we want to create.
Yeah. I remember the LinkedIn post, in our Janne's LinkedIn post. I checked it lately, and I think it had got almost like 2,000 likes.
Yeah.
And it was a Finnish post, so that tells a lot.
Yeah, I think people have stories from their everyday lives when things are not working. So,
And in the question of building a society, still we see a lot of solutions if there's a specific user group or there's a minority. So let's hire people to serve these people. So quite often the answer is it comes from the resources. So it comes from somehow how to solve this queue of people with the specific questions or problems. But coming from another perspective, we could then sort of design the society and the services in a way and in a manner that everybody can use them. And if we have this ethical layer in everything that we do, it's not about having different queues for different questions and people, but rather to have an inclusive society, which sounds pretty amazing.
I think
Sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah.
And I think that accessibility is one example of this. Accessible services are good for everyone. It used to be that kind of thing past in the days that we did accessibility as on top of the normal design, but now it's in the design and it's also in the legislation. So
Yeah.
it serves everyone.
Yeah. And Christina has a very good comment here. I don't think ethical approach needs to increase cost in a long run because making right decisions in the beginning of the project usually saves costs later. So
That's true.
True.
sort of to conclude that point. And Anton states that I feel the world is in a period of massive ethical disruption. Do you believe that we will ever share a set of global ethics that act moral principles that govern?
That is a
Global
big
ethics.
question.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Certainly, like what is good? I think like at least the last 2,000 years of ethical thinking by philosophies has not found kind of the silver bullet for what is good.
Yeah.
So I guess there is a challenge, like a globally wise. So I think it's about values. What kind of values do we implement in design?
Maybe I have one question that I was thinking already beforehand. Sami, you mentioned that many new recruits are eager to hear more about ethical design and ethical pioneering, and it seems to be a recruiting asset for companies that do that, like Go4. But in all of your opinion, is ethical design and ethical business, is it a generation issue?
Generation, I wouldn't say it's a generation issue.
No.
I think maybe it's part of what Anton just asked, kind of if we are in the middle of ethical disruption in a sense, like it's bigger thing than generation thing. It's for example, if you think about maybe we are in the phase with technology, with digitalization currently, like last 20, 30 years, it's been a digital kind of a really digitalization has pushed forward, and maybe now we are kind of starting to, in the last few years, starting to kind of understand and see that, hey, we should think carefully what we build, what we create, what kind of implications it actually has.
Yeah. I think it's more, yeah, exactly. I don't think it's a generation thing either. I think it's more about how the cycles of the world kind of sociopolitically and in general also work. I wouldn't say it's only our generation, but I think also now because of all of the disruption in the world, there's a new wave perhaps. We're maybe at a kind of a cusp somehow of this thinking becoming more popular, and I know that they're also teaching it in some schools, and in that sense, of course, perhaps the discussion is starting more than it has before.
Yeah. At least I used to be in in academic world, and there we had these kind of discussions like 15 years ago, something related to this, and I was just talking with my friend, my old colleague, and we were like, hey, maybe things that we discussed back then, it seems like they are kind of getting attention now, like in business world, like more broadly.
Yeah. There are a few more questions. Sari stating that asking people if they want their jobs replaced by automation, most probably say no because they want to keep their jobs. But a lot of jobs have already been replaced by automation or technology, and in the long run it has turned out to be for the better. Who, for example, misses plowing their wheat fields manually without the help of machinery or calling Centrali Santra. So Sari continues, should the focus be on making sure that people who might lose their jobs because of automation will be taken care by re-educating or some other way?
I think that's a really good question, and totally agree. Re-education, like in automation literature, people talk about upskilling and reskilling. So there is definitely going to be work for people as well. That's how I at least see it. But certainly how we kind of make that transition, how we make those disruptions, I think that tells also a lot about us, kind of how do we take the society into account when we disrupt it with some new technology.
But that's it. That's what we're also saying, that we do need to take a wider view. So we can't just think about we're going to automate this, but we do have to take the societal view as we're doing it. We do need to think about how does this impact all of these people, and then work towards a solution that works for everyone.
Yeah. Sort of to conclude this discussion, Anton asks a really good question. Ethics is really about long-term thinking versus quarterly short-term economic wins. How do we change that mindset?
I hope we are doing it right now.
Yeah.
I think the mindset is already changing a bit because we are having this webinar, we are having these kind of discussions, and Go4 wants to kind of raise these issues in many ways. So yeah, I hope we are doing it right now, but it's a long road still.
And like Christina commented a while ago, I think was that if we put some, I guess, we focus on it now, it won't be so costly in the long term. So it's something that needs maybe an upfront decision and then also the resources for it. But on the long term, of course, it won't be the same.
Yeah. Very good questions. Thank you everybody online for asking them. Maybe as a last question to you, how do you see the future of ethical design and ethical work?
Well, we hope that this is a discussion starter with everyone, and we hope to get feedback and hope to come up with some new ways of doing ethical design. That's one thing. And another thing is maybe related to the generation question, is that there is interest in schools and universities, and they are already having courses related to these kind of things. So they are teaching and learning about more sustainable world, and we want to be part of that. So I think that young people who are thinking ahead about their future careers are very interested to find a job where they can do this kind of valuable things. So I think that is one point.
And I do think that the importance of it will keep increasing when we realize that if we don't pay attention to to creating these equitable digital services. They won't just happen automatically, but we actually have to focus on it for it to become reality. So I do think that the value and the importance of it will keep increasing in the future as well.
I think it's good to remember that technology doesn't have kind of its own path. People, we are actually the ones who can decide what is the direction.
Yeah.
This is really good place to conclude our discussions. So paradigm shift is already happening. Thank you so much, Sami, Suvi, and Michelle, for your presentation and all the discussion. And thank you also everybody who has been listening online. Thank you for your questions and your participation. And I also want to remind here that we have the third webinar in this series taking place a week from now, 31st of January. And then we have the topic of what we can learn about utilizing AI and data ethically. Thank you for joining and listening. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.